Welcome back to Get a Grip on Lighting. On today's show, we are very honored to be joined by Elizabeth Chamberlain. She goes by Liz, so Liz Chamberlain is Director of Sustainability at iFixit, where you can find everything you need to fix consumer gadgets and more. She heads the company's fight for the right to repair, which is the idea that you should be able to fix everything you own, and manufacturers shouldn't be able to stop you. Sounds pretty reasonable. Her writing about repair and e-waste has been published in the Wall Street Journal, Wired, and she's been interviewed by NPR and Vox. She's got an X account, Liz_iFixit on X, and you can go to iFixit.com to figure out more. But you know what? The first thing you need to do is stop being a loser and don't use jack chain anymore, Greg. You got to go to griplocksystems, man. .com, griplocksystems.com. Get that. What do they call those things there? They're amazing. Anyway, we use them all the time.
Well, the cable gripper, yeah.
Cable.
And I'm telling you, that's all I've ever known. So I never was a loser. I never used chain.
I was a loser.
But I'm telling you, you were. You should have stopped right away. But yes, the cable gripper, greatest system out there. I'm telling you, every project I ever sell, I use it. I don't care that it costs a little bit of money. It saves a ton in labor. It's adjustable. Where it stops, it locks. You can move it without a tool. And you know what? You can repair this stuff.
Yeah.
You don't need to often, but you can repair it if you need to easily. So I love it.
And you can it's a lot easier to repair LED light fixtures if you can take them out of the ceiling very quickly and take them down to a bench to work on them. And with grip lock systems, you can simply push the little button, squeeze the thing, down it goes, then it's hanging on one side, you hold it, you take, and down it goes and you fix the light fixture. That's how it works. Go to griplocksystems.com. Don't be a loser. Don't use jack chain. Okay, of course, the National Association of Innovative Lighting Distributors. Sorry to say that our controls course has already been registered. You can't register anymore. It's going live in Lightivation, but we got a convention coming up in September, Greg Eric.
We do, and today's topic is going to be perfect for it. It's all about the future of lighting distribution. But get to the convention to learn about it. We're going to talk about this topic today and at the convention, so be ready.
Yeah, we don't call it right to repair at Nailed all the time. We call it our sustainability committee. We talk about light bulbs. We talk about the return to light bulbs. We moved away from light bulbs. We need to go back to light bulbs. You can change. It's almost like a joke, Greg Eric, before we get to Liz here in a second. How many electricians does it take to change a light bulb, Greg Eric?
Many. More than one.
Unfortunately, the joke's on you. There's no light bulb. That's why you need an electrician. Liz Chamberlain, welcome to the Get a Grip on Lighting podcast.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
So, right to repair, we don't really call it that in the lighting industry. Nobody says that too much yet because in lighting, the right to repair was assumed from day one for 110 years. And now that's changed, and it's devastating for some people in certain environments. iFixit, give me a brief overview of what you guys do, what your mission is. Give me the elevator pitch.
Yeah. So we're the free repair manual for everything. We've got 100,000 guides for how to fix everything from toasters to tractors, everything in between. And we started in 2003 when our co-founder dropped a MacBook off his dorm room bed and bent the power plug, couldn't find a guide for how to fix it, couldn't find the parts for how to fix it. And so he and his roommates took it apart and figured it out themselves, soldered it, and took pictures and made a guide and put it on the internet. And they found that a bunch of other people had the same problem with Apple products specifically. They wanted to be able to fix them themselves and couldn't find what they needed. And so we started at that point, basically just documenting everything Apple had made and, taking things apart and selling the parts from used equipment. And as we did that, we found more and more and more industries where the same thing was happening, toasters and tractors and so on. And it's super interesting to hear you talk about how right to repair hasn't really, until very recently, been necessary in the lighting industry. I think we've used light bulbs as an example for so long in right to repair. Like you wouldn't buy something if you couldn't change the light bulb, right? And that was true.
Unfortunately, probably about 70 or 80% of all light fixtures are sold with non-replaceable components, so they become e-waste when they burn out.
That's horrifying.
Listen, I'm the host of the Get a Grip on Lighting podcast. I've been talking about this for 5 years. Nobody listens to me, Greg Eric. Nobody listens to Colligan.
Maybe now they will. Liz is there to tell us.
So it's interesting. I run a lamp recycling business out of my office. And so when you recycle light bulbs, which contain mercury, a lot of the old conventional lights, they need to go to a mercury management facility. And so the lighting industry had streams of getting this stuff to mercury management facilities. And I was one of the junction points or collection points of those streams. We get a lot of e-waste back. You wouldn't believe what old Macintosh and Apple computers are worth, even if they don't work. And if they work, some of the computers, we pulled out these two Mac computers. They're beautiful. They look nice. They look beautiful. Late 1990s, early 2000s models. They're worth almost $1,000 if they turn on.
Wow.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
That's Canadian dollars. So what is that? $10 US, Craig?
$10,
But yeah, something like that. So So tell me about. Have you gotten into anything related to lighting? Have you seen anything from lighting come along? Because my mind will be blown if it has.
The bills that we have been pushing really hard for, and we passed, we just passed a bill in Washington that makes our sixth electronics right to repair bill. They cover anything with a chip. And so there are some lighting fixtures that would be covered in a lot of the states where we passed in the US, and not so much in Europe, but I think we've made some progress still. But I think because we come out of the consumer electronics industry, we pushed really hard on manufacturers and consumer electronics to begin to comply, and they've
So lighting is electronics now. That's what it is.
Yeah. I mean,
That's what it is.
any in the vast majority of the states where we passed, I think lighting fixtures that have a microchip in them, which is probably most of them at this point,
All of them,
would be covered. Yeah.
So we call them LED chips. That's what they're called when they go on the board, right? So they're called chips. The light source is called the chip. Greg, Eric, my mind is blown right now. I think we're making a big move here.
Right. The right to repair is I'm reading is a global movement. What exactly is the right to repair? How does it work? You mentioned states. Is it state by state? Is it going beyond that? Tell us the whole movement and what it's all about.
Yeah. So the idea is that you should be able to fix everything you own, which absolutely, everybody nods when I say that. It's funny. It's one of those. No matter where you're from, you hear that and you're like, yeah, you know what? We should be able to fix everything we own. But what happens is manufacturers get in the way of that by not providing parts or not providing tools or by restricting access to documentation, and so our laws that we've been working to pass are pushing manufacturers to provide the same parts, tools, and documentation that they provide to their own in-house service providers, to independent service providers, and to the general public.
Do you want to know how the lighting industry worked before?
Please.
Please. It's gonna expand your understanding of this, because the lighting industry is the original right to repair industry. It was totally standardized. So the lighting industry had three leaders, were GE, Philips, and Sylvania. I'm sure you know those names.
Yeah.
And they would get together with government bodies like ANSI and NEMA and Department of Energy, and they would create standardized mechanical form factors, bases, and so on that all manufacturers would use to create light sources. And even the ballast, the wiring diagrams, the colors of wires, where the screws went on the mechanical form factors were all agreed upon prior to introducing a new product group. Okay? And so what happened in the lighting industry is a massive secondary parts market became created. And there was something called Tier 1 manufacturers, which were GE, Philips, Sylvania, maybe Iwasaki and Ushio, a couple Japanese, and then Osram and Radium, a couple German manufacturers, were like the Tier 1 lighting manufacturers. But then Tier 2 supplied replacement parts, which matched all those parts. And they were cross-manufacturer, and they worked in every socket, no matter what. So the lighting industry used to have an extremely robust secondary parts market to supply replacement light bulbs. And a 60-watt light bulb was a 60-watt light bulb. A F32 T8 41K was an F32 T8 41K. And manufacturers would fight on how long they lasted. The fight was over how long they lasted, or what their color rendering index was, performance characteristics, quality characteristics. They wouldn't make them longer or shorter or a different mechanical form factor, so only you could buy it from them. And in fact, the lighting industry used to eschew and push away people that wanted to introduce custom-made stuff because you couldn't change a light bulb. Now, in the last 10 years, that whole beautiful edifice for 100 years going back to Edison has come crashing down. And now lighting is no different than cell phones, computers, or anything else, unfortunately.
What's driving that? Why has that change
There's
happened?
an organization called the Design Lights Consortium, and they are not lighting people, and they don't design any lights themselves. But what they do is they tell other people how to design lights so that they can label them energy efficient and allow them to enter into utility rebate programs. And so this organization serves utilities, and it has the lighting industry under control of it. And what it does is say, if you don't abide by our standards, you're not able to get a utility rebate in any state in the United States or any province in Canada. And their job, their job is what they want to do. They're motivated financially, Liz. Their motivation financially is to continually change the standards as much as possible, so that lighting manufacturers have to pay them new fees for a latest thing that's the most energy efficient thing that ever came across the plate. It's 1% better, it's 5% better. But what this has led to, Liz, is total de-standardization of the lighting industry. Everybody's focused on one metric, which is the most highest energy efficiency, and that's come at the expense of any maintenance or repairability of those items. And that organization is called the Design Lights Consortium. And we have a vendetta against them here on Get a Grip. Not a vendetta, Greg. What would you call it?
An issue. How about
an issue? Yeah, we want to talk about it, but they refuse to talk about it. They don't want to come talk to us.
Yeah.
So that's what happened in the lighting industry. It's a tragedy. I think the lighting industry should have been an example of how to make right to repair.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow.
So who started the movement? Like, where did the movement come from? Did you guys start it?
Sort of.
Okay.
The first time that a law passed called a right to repair law was in Massachusetts in 2012, and it was an automotive right to repair law, and it sparked a national agreement of auto manufacturers to abide by it nationwide. And my boss, Kyle, who's the guy who dropped his laptop off his college bed, saw this, thought this was a cool idea, and ran into somebody who was a server industry veteran at a conference who was making the same complaints that, things didn't have parts, tools, documentations. Manufacturers were holding their service contracts super tight, and it was resulting in e-waste and unnecessary loss of equipment that was still good. And so they teamed up, and they started in 2014. They took this Massachusetts auto right to repair law and find and replaced everywhere it said automobile and put in electronics, and tried running that in South Dakota. And it didn't really go anywhere that year, but they kept trying, and we've now had 6 bills pass.
Why South Dakota? That's a tough one to pass.
They knew somebody there.
Okay.
There was somebody at the same conference where they met who was a legislator from South Dakota who thought he could do it, so gave it a try.
But it's a state by state thing, is what you're saying. It's a regional, or it's not a nationwide deal at this point. It can't be.
Yeah, I mean, I think ultimately, we want it to be international. We want it to certainly be national, and there are major movements around the world. There's a Canadian network, the Can Repair Network, that's fighting for Canada right to repair. There's a big movement in Europe and Australia and New Zealand. But our vision in the U.S. was based actually on e-waste recycling laws. We we saw the way that that those things got passed in the states, and one by one they kind of got stronger and stronger, and we reached a point where what I think 25 of 50 states have passed some sort of e-waste law, and that means that manufacturers basically have to do it. They couldn't fight 25 laws, and they had to like hit the highest bar. And so our hope was that we could pass something and then ratchet it up and ratchet it up, and that's basically what we've done and we plan to keep doing.
Amen, sister. Let me throw perhaps something in the middle here which may make you go okay. I think the focus on manufacturers might be incorrect. So, a lot of times, why do people focus on manufacturers when it comes to different problems related, like downstream products from their downstream from the sale of the product, right? What happens? Is it e-waste? Who should pay for the e-waste? Does it have forever chemicals in it? Does it have
Yeah.
hazardous waste in it? There's all these different questions that arise about post-consumer waste. Okay. And what the lighting industry did, I think, in its early days, we're going back 100 years, 120 years, okay, and then continued forward to probably about 2014, maybe 15, something like that. What happened was that instead of right to repair using manufacturer components, what was created was commoditized sockets and electrical connections.
Hmm.
So the industry commoditized the socket. Every lamp was 4 feet, exactly 48 inches long, and had a G13 medium bipin socket and created 2,800 lumens. And all these things were standardized. And so
Yeah.
I think the idea of asking for manufacturers to do us a favor in 5 years is part yes, but the favor that I think electronics manufacturers could do would be to standardize the way things connect together as an
Absolutely.
industry. And I think this would serve to make America a much more competitive, efficient, low cost economy for its citizens and consumers. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
this isn't that we're not against prosperity. This will
Yeah.
create prosperity. Commoditization, standardization makes everything that's good cheaper for everybody. Can you imagine if
Absolutely.
the electrical industry did not have a right to repair? Electrical, I'm not talking electronics. Can you imagine electrical? If everybody made their pipe and connectors and wire different gauges and sizes, Greg? That would create total chaos. Or plumbing.
Yeah.
Let's say plumbing said, yeah, my pipes aren't 1 inch anymore, they're an inch and an eighth.
Oh.
Like, can you imagine like how our
Yeah.
society would collapse on it into itself if every time you wanted to change a pipe, you had to buy the pipe from the only manufacturer that made that pipe?
Right.
This is what's happening in lighting, and this is also what's happening. It has always been the case in electronics. This has always
Yeah.
been the case with with electronics, but lighting is becoming electronics, unfortunately.
Yeah. No, I think you're absolutely right. I think standardization it's a huge boon to any industry where where people rely on things to keep working. And it's a huge part of the scorecard that we use when we score electronic products on repairability. Uh, we've been doing this since about 2012, 2013. We've been giving 0 out of 10 repairability scores for new things as they come out on the market. And in the last about 5 years, manufacturers have started coming to us and saying, all right, we want a better repairability score. How do we do that?
Mm-hmm.
And so we've started working with Google. We're the official repair parts distributor for Google Pixel phones, and we give them repair assessments. Same thing for Logitech. We've started working with HP, and one of the major points on our scorecard is how many standardized parts do you have? What parts in your
Hmm.
device can you go get from another manufacturer, get harvest from another machine? Because it makes such a huge difference and makes it possible for things to last when they really wouldn't otherwise.
If you have to solder something, you've lost. You know what I'm saying? If something has to be soldered, or if it can't just be plugged in or screwed in or twisted into the device, it can't, like your chances of that device being repaired, even if somebody wants to repair it, is extremely low, Liz.
It's true. We just started making our very first electronic tool is a soldering iron. We just released it last year, and so, we're on the train of trying to teach everybody how to solder. But I agree with you that replacing a battery, replacing a screen in electronics, those should not be soldering
Batteries,
jobs. They
what
really shouldn't.
another amazing example of standardization. AA
Yeah.
batteries. Race to the bottom, boys. That's how it works. This is a commodity item. You got to move the product, and it has to fit this thing, and it has to be recyclable, and the hazardous materials have to be extracted from it. That's the game.
Yeah.
Standardization is the game, because once you have standardized products, now you can recycle them too, because you have a stream for AA batteries. Like their AA batteries get recycled, at least in Ontario, because everybody knows what's in a AA battery. They know what a
So,
AA battery is.
Liz, you can hear his passion. I know this is your show, though. I want to hear from you a little bit more. Um, so the
I'm
the
going on mute. I'm going to put it on mute.
yeah.
No, no, no.
Okay,
I
let's
mean, I'm
talk.
learning
Let's
so
talk.
much. I'm.
Well, you're the guest, so let's talk. Like, what if the lighting industry said we got to take a stand and we want to make right to repair a law in lighting? Like, you have to have repairable fixtures. How do we do it? What are the steps to
I
take?
mean, I think we've got template legislation that is general, that is about anything with a chip. And if you wanted to focus it in to make it absolutely clear to lighting manufacturers that they're covered and no question, legislators know that they're covered. I think you'd basically add it to the covered products list and find somebody who was interested in running the bill. We've got champions in states where we've already passed legislation, for instance, who are excited about right to repair and interested in running more bills. So if it's something you want to do, we can certainly push. Although as I said, I think in a lot of the states where we've already passed it, it likely would technically be covered. So really the question is, will the attorney general enforce it for for lighting? And so
That's a
I
question
think
with
the case
yeah. Go ahead.
the challenge would be then to find some case where you know that a manufacturer has internal service for something that they're not making available to the public or to independent techs,
I know
and
some. I
then
gotta come on. I know
you
some
do
dirty
you
lighting
do
companies. I know some companies that behave that way. Sorry, I gotta go on mute again.
no, yeah I tell me what are they doing.
So what happens? So it's interesting. So the first era of this came out. I'm gonna say in my memory. So I've been in the business since 1999, lighting industry, and selling light bulbs, selling replacement, like selling right to repair to people. Basically, I've been selling the right to
Yeah.
repair to people for 25 years. Craig's done the same thing, and all of our members in our association. That's what we do. We sell literally. Our business is based on the right to repair a light fixture. We're lighting distributors. We sell replacement parts for light fixtures. That's what we do, right? So
Yeah.
our entire industry and association is founded, it's a presupposition in our, we don't even talk about it because it's an axiomatic, it's an axiom in our association that there's replaceable parts for light fixtures. That's why this
Yeah.
association exists. Right? We didn't come out saying that, but we always assumed that from the beginning. We were a right to repair association from 1977. People that in the lighting industry. So I forgot my question. You asked me a question. What was it? I
it,
went off the.
it
Companies
what
that are doing.
manufacturers are, yeah, what are they
So
what are
the
they
way it
doing? What are
works
the
is
dirty
what they do
tricks?
is what they do is originally they would make components that were in the shape of ballasts and fit, and they were in the same mechanical form factors, but
Yeah.
they would create control systems that they would then sunset. And then they would change the product codes on those items,
Um,
and so you couldn't figure out what it was and what could fix it, and then you'd have to have them back in there between 5 and 10 years. So they would 5 years, and then sunset that product group, get rid of it, and then they would have a new product group, and only they knew whether it was compatible or not. They wouldn't share that information. So instead of going for the socket or the mechanical, how many of these I ripped out? I just ripped the control systems out of the places and put light switches and light bulbs and regular stuff.
Sure.
Right? I just ripped their systems out. But a lot of people flip up the thing and call the 800 number, and then that company's back in there again to sell them a new control system when the old control system was fine. You understand what I mean? There's nothing wrong with it.
Yeah.
So there's companies in lighting that are super predatory like that on their own customers.
Yeah.
That's like that we've known that for 20 years, more than 20 years. That's how they behave. They're predatory. They want to come back in there and get another $200,000 to fix something. So that happens all the time in lighting. You're making your legislation. So everybody assumes you can change a light bulb, but you can't now.
Yeah.
So your legislation is making that illegal? In what states? Where is this happening?
So we passed laws in New York, California, Minnesota, Oregon, Colorado, and Washington.
So what is the law in Minnesota that you passed? I'm in Minnesota.
Yeah. So it's a right to repair electronics and appliances. So basically says that if manufacturers make parts, tools, and documentation for something available to their in-house service techs, so if they have something that they repair themselves, they have to make the same degree of parts, tools, and documentation available to the public and to independent techs. And so if they're not, if you have an example where they're not, we can complain to the
Are they required to release the IP and allow for replacement parts to be made?
They're not required to release, designs of fixtures, for instance, but they are required to sell the parts themselves. So I think in my ideal world, when parts stop being made, the designs for those parts would have to become public, but we're not there. And I think there's some reasonable arguments to be had there about the importance of manufacturers continuing to iterate on designs and being able to make money off their own R&D and so on. But it's I think the story you're telling of slightly changed model numbers, slightly changed product codes, so that's not technically the same product, it's something new. I've heard that story before in other industries. That's a
small part of the problem. That's a small part of the problem in lighting, Greg. The big part of the problem is that everything's custom and nothing can be repaired. That's the real.
Well, that's what I'm getting at. Is so electronics is broad. Does that include lighting? We don't know. It sounds to me like a lot of gray area could be had. And then what actually is a repair? Is a repair? Oh, you can change this, but if that doesn't fix it, it's this piece that's out. Then you have to replace it.
Right.
Should you be able to replace? There's so many little components that you could say, well, we can repair it, but we couldn't repair this, but we can't repair that. Is that?
Yeah.
That's okay, right? I mean, you can't define, because then the other question is, you got 6 states. So does Apple have to make their phone different for those 6 states, or they won't do that,
No,
So
what they've started doing is selling parts to everybody. Yeah.
okay.
But yeah, I mean, I think you're absolutely right that there are many different components, and the right to repair laws that we passed rely on parity between in-house repair and outside repair. Really, the goal is to bring back competition into the independent repair industry. But I think that leaves problems untouched, and I can imagine a bill based on this little picture that I'm getting of the problems in your industry. I can imagine a bill that requires some standardization, that requires some publishing of.
I think that's a mistake. For the lighting industry, I think
what do you think?
I think for the lighting industry, the lighting industry is run on standards, okay? And there's like standards that are created. But Greg, has the IES, they've always assumed that you can change light bulbs. They've always assumed that you can change a ballast, right? So they've never actually dictated standards. So the standards were inherent. All this stuff was inherently built into the lighting industry from day one, Liz. day one, the right to repair was built into the lighting industry. This socket is an E26, whatever, with the screws through the bottom, the 2 3/8. Everything is standardized. So 100-year-old light fixtures, you could, not 100, so you're going back maybe, you're talking, you could repair light fixtures from the 1940s, 1930s.
Wow.
There's,
Yeah.
you can repair them because from that time forward they were standardized. But the problem is that it's not that the manufacturers won't sell parts; it's that the fixtures are so complex now that the value of repair is higher than the cost to buy new and throw out the old one.
Yeah.
That's the major problem in lighting. Right? No one would
Yeah.
ever pay for the repair because the repair is uncertain, like Greg said. You might not fix it if you change the driver, Greg, right?
Right.
The LED array might be out. Maybe it's the microwave sensor, or maybe it's this. Who knows what's wrong with it? And people are not going to monkey around with 400 light fixtures in a facility. They're just going to rip them all out and
Sure.
and get new ones.
Yeah.
And that's why I call it all certified garbage. All these light fixtures are certified garbage. That's what I call them. Because it's but here's the difference. Consumer electronics are pleasure tools and business tools for us that, usually keep a computer for 3, 5, 10 years. Even after that, its life is over at some point, right?
Yeah.
Light fixtures are critical infrastructure. And if it becomes really expensive and a hassle and you have to change every light every single time, this is going to massively reduce the productivity. We're going to waste a lot of electrical labor and money replacing light fixtures every 5 to 7 years on all of our street lights and all of our buildings. Think about all the 2x4 fixtures, Greg, that are going to go to landfill or shredded or whatever it is, and bring them take the iron ore from Canada, send it to China. They're going to turn it into a light fixture, send it back, and then we're going to throw it in the garbage in 7 years and buy another one. That's the cycle.
Oh.
That's the cycle.
Yeah.
Don't be a loser, Greg Eric.
Don't be.
Don't be a loser. Go to gripblocksystems.com. Listen, those parts can be reused over and over again.
They can, and I do right now. We have a lot of jobs where we've done an old high bay. Now we got to put a new one in because we can't repair it. And we can reuse the hanging kit, though, and it's a cable gripper, adjustable without a tool. Awesome. Best. No chain.
Go to gripblocksystems.com. Of course, the National Association of Innovative Lighting Distributors, the original Right to Repair Association, going back before Right to Repair was even a thing. We're original. We're the OGs. That's right. It was an axiomatic presupposition for us that there was a right to repair a light fixture. We never even thought about that it would change, but it changed. So go to NALD.org if you have light bulbs in a warehouse and you sell them on Amazon, you sell them over the counter, however you sell them also. I never say this, but hey, how about subscribe, like, share, that kind of stuff, Greg? Should we tell the peeps out there to do it? They're all my colleagues, Liz. And of course, Liz Chamberlain from iFixit. Thank you for being a guest on Get a Grip on Lighting.